Darling, trust me, this arcade cabinet definitely matches our living room ensemble. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Small solutions to big tech problems. 2 miniaturized solutions you don't need, but you might really want.
From Beetles to bees, YouTuber Little Car discusses the micro bee.
Look, Mum, 1 point. I'm going to attempt to cover Eurovision. Wish me luck.
And FPGA-based replacement of the Atari POKEY, along with 2D things becoming 3D and 3D things becoming isometric, all coming up on this week's show for the week of Saturday the 23rd of May, 2026.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Chris?
Jason?
What's going on?
I don't know.
It's just
us two?
There's just a lot of you on my screen. I just see a lot of Chris.
What are you talking about?
I've never had this much Chris on my screen before. There's usually a Dave or there's somebody else. It's just
sometimes
us dudes.
3 or more. Now it's just us two. All I'm seeing on my screen is a big version of you and a small version of me.
And in fairness, that could be upsetting as well. So we are going to have to be brave. We've trained for this.
We can do this.
Remember our assignments?
Yes.
We'll get through
it. I am having Wayne's World flashbacks, but other than that, we'll move on.
We are worthy. All right, let's do it.
Okay.
I know that we've talked on the show about certain things that cartoons and early television suggested to us as kids were going to be something we'd encounter a lot more in adult life than we really do. Quicksand is obviously really high on that list. But I think something else which seemed like it would be a lot more prominent, or perhaps I should say more prevalent in the grown-up world, is Murphy bed technology. And you know what I'm talking about, even if you don't know it by name. A Murphy bed was the trademark name for a bed that unfolds out of the wall after you open a door, which otherwise looks like it might lead to a closet or maybe some other room. Murphy beds, or other things that fold up into the wall like them, they figure into tons and tons of cartoons, and even James Bond has a Murphy bed misadventure in You Only Live Twice. And every so often, I have run into like a Murphy ironing board in an older house or something like that. But somewhere along the line, at least in my world, the notion of something which completely folds up and disappears from sight, or at least vanishes into the literal and figurative woodwork, seemed to fall away, even as the engineering know-how to do actual transformers but in real life has become cheaper and easier to come by. But somebody sat down and did the market research. What's simultaneously the coolest and possibly the most unsightly thing a retro enthusiast can put in their home? Well, that's a stand-up arcade cabinet, of course. How much easier to convince one's spouse, roommate, or other cohabitant to let one have an arcade cabinet if said tall, purpose-specific gaming device could be hidden in plain sight when you're not entertaining? Well, a pair of entrepreneurs, Les Cookson and Ken Higgison, say they've cracked the code in the form of the Swap Arcade, full arcade that turns into a furniture cabinet. Thanks to both Seaworldliness 7525 and SDMat22 for pointing out the reports about this project, which appeared on New Atlas and elsewhere. This is a literal transformer piece of furniture. In arcade mode, it's approximately 70 inches tall by 28 wide and 14 deep. Folded up into a cabinet, it gets down to about 36 inches tall, 29 by 13.5 on the ground. Now, Chris, I got to ask, because I do not recall the full details offhand. What were the marital politics of you acquiring your current arcade cabinet? And have you been through other ownership phases or attempts to acquire such ungainly household items?
Well, given it was only $35, the accountant, as she is sometimes lovingly referred to, as it, that was fine with her, so that was fine. And given I have a sizable garage, space is not a problem, at least just for one cab. That's not a problem. And also, Nicky does actually enjoy a round of Frogger or Pac-Man or whatever, so that was fine as well. I do tend to pick a careful time to have a conversation when the purchase is expensive. So I'm talking, towards $1,000 or more Australian, and that's only fair. That's a discussion. And I think that's the main reason why I've not yet got myself an original Space Invaders cabinet or an original Jammer or a Neo Geo cabinet, because that would be an entirely different discussion, Jason.
Yeah. Neo Geo, now you're talking, that's retirement fund money. All right, you'll probably have guessed by now that it wouldn't be practical to have a cabinet like this fold up with a big CRT sitting inside, and of course you would be right. The spec sheet says there's a 27-inch contemporary flat panel HDMI display in there. The tech specs are not eye-popping. The specs tell us that this is a, quote, built-in retro gaming system with Raspberry Pi 4, case, cooling fan, Batocera pre-installed, and a starter set of 100 games, the ability to load your own classic and retro games, additional compatibility with the Switch and Switch 2, PS3, PS2, original PlayStation, PCX input, and other retro gaming systems, unquote. For a mere $1,200 US on Kickstarter, a price which does not include shipping, you will get this system equipped with a 2-player arcade control panel. It has Sanwa joysticks with 8-button controls for each player, plus auxiliary function buttons, for player 1 start and all that jazz. They use the Brook Zero Pi fighting board encoder for the sticks, which they say make it easier to use those sticks if you do connect the system up to a variety of contemporary consoles and computers. You will get to choose between the unfinished wood or 3 finished colors. And there are some upgrade options to go beyond the Pi 4 to a beefier embedded PC and so forth. And I honestly thought, looking at the pictures at first, that those cabinet doors would be purely decorative, just kind of bluff doors. But no, you can in fact access the cabinet storage even while the arcade aspects are folded up. And that is pretty cool. And I mean, this is a pretty cool project. Obviously, it would be nice to know how many iterations of folding and unfolding one of these things can endure before it needs repair. I'm a little thrown by the fact that they launched a very similar Kickstarter last month and then said, wait a second, we're going to cancel that one and start a new, better one, which now this one is. So Chris, as an arcade owner, do you think that folks should look into something like this versus just a regular, boring old fixed cabinet?
The funny thing is, in the very room I do the recording in, which doubles up as a guest room, I'd actually contemplated one of the fold-away beds you were referring to. So this room can act as a lounge and a guest room. So why not an arcade machine, especially if space is short and you don't have a sizable shed or garage? And I think pretty much every house I've ever lived in the UK, except maybe the last one I had over there, which was the 3-story end of terrace. But most of them, you could only house one arcade cabinet, if that, So this is a nice way of getting away with it. And in fact, the first house we owned in the UK was a 2-up, 2-down, as they're traditionally called, mid-terrace. And that where we kept our computer was in the lounge, but it was in what looked like, a cabinet. So it looked like a piece of lounge room furniture. But you open up the doors, pulled out the shelf tray to get your keyboard out, and there is where you kept your CRT and your PC. So this idea is kind of not new, if I can put it that way, but this is better because it's an arcade machine, not just a PC. It does make me think about the arcade 1-up machines, though, and how maybe they were pretty on point with just being 3/4 size. So same problem, where do you put an arcade cabinet? And that was their way of getting around it. But yeah, I like this idea. Yep.
Another way to attack the space problem. Yep. Now, as we record, their Kickstarter has attracted approximately 100 buyers, backers, however you want to term them, which was multiple times of their initial backer goal. And I will expect those numbers to grow substantially before their June 11 cutoff. So, this is a product that's putting a lot of arcade power into a form factor that's half the size that you would expect. 42 Nobody 42 shared a story, which, depending how you look at it, it's either, call it, all the power of a thin and light laptop, but pocket size. But maybe it's more like, hey, at least somebody cares about preserving the unfairly forgotten and overlooked palm top PDA form factor. And that somebody today goes by the name of Exercising Ingenuity, and I will not argue with that title. The program is known as the Altoids 10 Minty Cyberdeck, which takes a cue from the rough and rugged decks of William Gibson and other cyberpunk lore. And somehow, this Altoids 10 contains a Pi 0W, a 2-inch LCD display, a 750 milliamp battery, which is not a ton of juice, but it's something. There's a custom-built keyboard to drive the thing. It still manages to keep some of the GPIO pins accessible outside of the tin. And there's a standard USB-A front-facing port for peripheral connectivity. It is a really, really cool project. The creator notes that he was hoping to run full-fledged Linux Mint on it, but he had to settle for Raspbian given the limitations of the Pi 0W. But it's really cool. Just for the keyboard alone, which itself is using an RP2040 chip to drive it, this project is worth a hearty round of applause. Now, Chris, Do you care about this kind of thing at all? Like I'm kind of the vocal PDA palm top enthusiast. I'm not sure how much you go in for these kinds of like, well, it's surprisingly capable in this surprisingly small footprint sort of exercises.
Oh, definitely. I'm one of the first. As soon as people were saying, have you seen what the iPhone could do? I was one of the first to say, but that's not even new. And then, rattle off all the other palm style devices that I'd at least looked at, if not owned prior to that. So yeah, hell yeah. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, take this project to Atari, neaten it up a bit and just present it as a concept to Atari with this one simple pitch. I bring you the Atari Portfolio 2, and I would buy that. Definitely. Or, maybe it's something new Commodore could rebrand and take on, have it as an offline palm top computer. That'd be great. Mm-hmm. Great for, I don't know, taking down to the pub so that I can actually finish my This Week in Retro notes in time. But I am, even in the smartphone era, I'm a big sucker for flick out keyboards with physical buttons. I think that's so much nicer than typing on a touchscreen. So hell yeah, I'm up for this kind of thing.
And you're right. Like the PDA was designed for powerful capability without being tied to an online service, which a lot of maybe phone apps are not. So you may be onto something there. Now, I first became aware of the idea of the Altoids tin as a computer case many years ago at VCF Midwest because there's a group of enthusiasts of the fairly obscure, I would be surprised if we've covered it on This Week in Retro, the Cosmac 1802 ELF computer. And they have been selling an Altoids tin compatible variant of their reproduction for some time now. I'm glad to see that there are beefier options today that have the added charm of being completely self-contained computers.
What I find interesting about this project as well, Jason, is the fact that it kind of goes against the flow. And what I mean about that is it's more power in a small device rather than let's make something full laptop size with a mobile phone CPU in it, such as the direction Apple is taking to make things cheaper as well. But that seems to be the way they're going with that. Whereas this is let's make a small thing as powerful as possible.
Very cool. And any week in which the palm top computer is in the news and we're reducing the social barriers to owning an arcade cabinet feels like a pretty good week in retro to me.
We are sponsored this week, thank you very much, by PCBWay. And if you're not familiar with them, they have 24-hour production lead time, team supported by over 90 professionals and technical staff, 99% on-time shipping, great quality approved by customers all over the world, a 24/7 non-stop production and assistance service, low minimum quantity requirements, factory PCBs with competitive advantages, a Chinese expert in electrical manufacturing and service. And they do PCBs and they do CNC machining and all sorts of stuff. Don't they, Jason? You've got some of their projects up?
They do. One of the things they operate is their shared projects section. It's kind of a combination of social media and engineering collaboration hub. We always like to take a look at some of their featured projects. And this time around, there's a Pi game. It is called the Pi Digit Learning Game. In celebration of Pi Day, created this digit learning game made with a 3D printed enclosure, custom PCB, and assorted components. Here they are. So if you've ever wanted to turn irrational numbers into fun, you can do that with this Pi game project. There's also an interesting ESP32 RC plane camera flight recorder with dashboard. So if you've ever flown an RC airplane, want to know exactly what happened during a flight, altitude, orientation, temperature, and a visual record. Most of the off-the-shelf FPV systems won't help you because they stream live video but store nothing. The moment you land, the data is gone. This little onboard solution takes you much, much further. And this also caught my eye. The Crimp Deck, a portable digital force sensor for climbers. So whether your interests are in RC airplanes or in the hobby or profession of climbing, there's always an interesting project here on PCBWay. This Crimp Deck, it's a portable digital force sensor designed for climbers, coaches, and therapists to measure and train finger strength, pulling power, and endurance. And it is designed to work seamlessly with both the Tindeck and Frez apps. We don't know what those are, but if you are a climbing enthusiast, you probably do. You can find this project featured along with so many more on their shared project section. We thank PCBWay.com for sponsoring us this week. And if you or your organization would like to sponsor an upcoming episode of This Week in Retro, drop us a line, twir@thisweekinretro.com for details.
It's no secret that I grew up in the UK, and hence my memories and nostalgia are more closely related to things like the BBC Micro in schools, the Acorn Electron, and the ZX Spectrum than anything from overseas. Ironic then that I was brought onto this podcast to maintain an international flavour away from the UK. I know bugger all about the Australian scene from the 80s. I wasn't here. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. However, apparently my excuse isn't valid anymore because it would seem the history of one of Australia's most famous micros, the Microbee, has been covered in stunning detail by a petrolhead from the UK. Little Car, who we've had on the show as a guest before, has put out a wonderful video about Australia's answer to the BBC Micro and managed to shove a lot of content into under 20 minutes, and it's well worth your time. Thanks Squelch411 for making us aware of this, as it really is actually very interesting. Little Car, also known as Andy Haslam, goes into the very inception of Australian company Applied Technologies, founded by Owen Hill. And it was a home-based electronics business. It kind of sounds much like the guy I knew that I've mentioned in previous episodes, Ron, who he became my dealer for DB25 connectors as I was building null modem cables. And that sounds like essentially what Owen Hill was doing, selling components out of his home. Unlike Ron, however, Owen realized that it was worth his while selling kits to the public. And this really is where the Microbee was born and officially launched in 1982. Initially in kit form, which let's not forget is how the Sinclair ZX80 began life as a hobbyist kit purchased by my Lorderoni. Well, that's how the Microbee was also launched, according to this video anyway. And with the Microbee kit, they supplied a coupon so that you could return it for a fix if it didn't work once you'd put the thing together. This was later replaced, of course, by pre-built models and upgrades and expansions and even plans for Motorola 68000 based successors.
I'm going to jump in here for a second, Chris, because I was just listening to a slightly older edition of the Floppy Days podcast where he had two of the creators of the TRS-80 on and was talking about why the Tandy Corporation Radio Shack decided not to sell the original TRS-80 as a kit. And it was that they'd had a digital clock project that, sold as a kit. Right. And they would do a very similar thing to Microbee, where said, if you having trouble, send it in, we'll help you out, we'll finish it for you. And somebody had sent in a board that they had completely, and I mean completely, coated the bottom of the circuit board with solder. Because the instructions said, turn the board over and solder everything together. And this person like, all right, I did it, and it doesn't work. And apparently one of the executives said, all right, no more of this kit BS.
No more kits.
And I mean, not no more kits, but definitely like for something that's more complicated than a digital clock. He's like, we're not doing this as a kit.
Yeah, so. That's fair enough. That's a bit of a... Well, look, they took the instructions as read, right? They soldered everything together. Oh, dear. Anyway, as always, I don't want to spoil the video because it really is worth you going to watch. But things to note are how it was marketed at schools, which is a sort of an ongoing trend. And it had networking, and you could fill a classroom with machines at a fraction of the price of the alternative, which at the time was an Apple II. In fact, I think if I remember rightly, he said something along the lines of 6 Microbees being worth around the same amount as a single Apple II. So that's quite a difference in price. Given the close ties between Australia and the UK, I'm surprised the BBC Micro isn't really mentioned in that space, in fact, in terms of pushing computers into schools. But it's nice that Australia went and did their own thing. Jason, did you know much about the Microbee or the Australian scene at this point in history?
No, I mean, I knew it was a thing that existed, but we just don't get much of those models over here. And of course, you pointing out that it takes a British, what you call him, a petrol head, who of course famously lives on the American West Coast, which we discovered when we asked him to join us that episode at what for him was a very, very early start time. So
true.
Thank you again to Andy for rolling with that punch. What I found really interesting watching this recap was that this is another system that falls into that budget trap, where they came out later with an 8K model, adding it to a line that already had 16, 32, and 64K models. And this, in hindsight, was always a losing move. Always, always, always. The Atari 2600 coming out with 16K after they'd been selling 64K machines, loser move. Commodore 16, massive, massive loser move. And Andy remarks on this in the video that, it was amazing just how much you could get done with, kind of reference designs and sort of shared engineering. Because it does strike you, if you know a little bit about the contemporary machines, This thing looks a lot like the Exidy Sorcerer. Like they have a lot in common in terms of what they have inside and how they operate. And so that Microbee kept playing up that they were putting in, quote, $1 million of research and development, which, at the time, even wasn't even that much money. Obviously, is almost nothing now. I noted too that this was another company falling into the trap of, we're going to have multiple processors. We're going to run our next generation with a 68,000 and two Z80s. Like, what, yes, there's some sort of, I don't know, like running competition between these early computer engineers that they wanted to make these multiprocessor designs. The fact that this is such a well-known and remembered machine, even though it sounds like just 70,000 units, like that's not a lot. Even in a country, Australia, it would have had 20 odd million people in the 80s, give or take, something like that.
I wasn't here to count them.
Do your best. Yeah. It doesn't seem like too much.
Yeah.
And then the information shared about that next generation machine. I'm sorry, the fact that this Australian computer company in 1990 is going to release a next generation machine called the Matilda. Like that's the kind of thing that a lazy writer would say, like, well, obviously the Australian computer makers are going to release the Matilda. No, really. And the side facing 5.25 inch floppy drive was pretty funny. That was a feature of things like the Apple IIc, which are a little bit earlier. Seeing that in a 1990 case was kind of cute. But yeah, we learned a lot. To me, it's a very good 20-minute overview of a system that's tough to come by in the US. I mean, perhaps an expert, an Australian expert, could tell how many details it's eliding or glossing over or whatever.
Well, interestingly, on that point, Jason, Andy details in his video and links in the description to a video by Mr. Lurch, who many people will be familiar with, and he's a real Australian, and so he definitely can fill in some of the gaps. And he also mentions the excellent channel State of Electronics, and they certainly have covered this topic in great detail. And some of Andy's overlay, in fact, is used from their video on the topic. So there's definitely 2 more videos to look at if you're interested in this. He also mentions and links to information on the modern Microbee following and the work by former Applied Technologies employee Ewan J. Wordsworth, who basically makes and sells upgrades and gadgets made in the modern day, yes, for this little Aussie icon all these years later. So, if you're interested in what a computer from the land that gave us Neighbours, Mad Max, and the Ford Falcon XB Coupe look like, well, there's plenty to look into. For me, though, I can't wait for Little Car's next video because he promises that will be about the Spectrum 48K, and at least I know some stuff about that one. And on that note, but with an Aussie twist, It's My Thyroid has also posted in the subreddit a link to where you can download his Australian version of Jet Set Willy. I've played it. He's a madman, and I highly recommend you download that and check it out. Links to all of this and more, obviously, in the show notes.
So thanks to those of you who continue to contribute to our Jubilee review drive. Duncan turned 50 years old this year, and we'd asked you to come up with 50 new reviews of This Week in Retro on your favorite podcast app or podcast aggregator. Got a new one here from Pocket Tim. It says, the best and most entertaining place to get your retro news. He's been listening to Tour for about 3 to 4 years now. No arguments here. Thank you, Tim. If you do have a nice review for us, please let us know where you placed it so we can feature it in this segment. And thanks again for supporting that Jubilee drive. We also had a lot of really excellent feedback about Joe's appearance with us last week. And this is as good a time as any to remind you that as much as reviews help, your individual shares really do help as well. So when you see a story on the show or a guest or something else that you think would interest some of your like-minded contacts, those share buttons really are a valuable way to support the show.
As is Patreon. Thanks to Retro Electric Dad for joining the ranks of our monthly supporters. We do really appreciate everybody who helps us out by supporting the show.
That's patreon.com/thisweekinretro if you would like to join Electro Dad, retro or not, in supporting us on a monthly or annual basis.
We had a number of submissions around the theme of a game being turned into another genre of game. IO Sam pointed us to an isometric remake of Wolfenstein 3D, which means that a top-down game took a decades-long detour to an FPS before being remade as isometric. There's also a remix of A Tick Attack as a 3D FPS. So thanks to Bajako for pointing that out.
Yeah, that one's pretty fun. It's got like the original, brightly colored single color bitmap graphics just in a 3D world against that black background. So
I've chatted with the guy who did that, and he also did a 3D Saboteur a few years ago as well. I love his stuff, so maybe more on that.
Doing all the bigs. G7VFY submitted a Hackaday article on the vacuum tube's last stanza. It's a great overview of this pre-integrated circuit technology, which was essential to the development of the transistor tech, which gets us to where we are today.
Rowan Forrest linked us to a historic TV clip from Thames TV in the UK, now on YouTube. It's from the 80s and discusses the home and business computer options for those considering Mac and IBM compatible alternatives. I was going to rant about the lack of Amiga, but actually they do mention it and seem very excited about it. But at the time of recording the show and at the time of airing, Commodore UK hadn't been able to actually provide them with a machine to show. So instead, they show us the lovingly named Mac Basher, also known as the Atari STE. I love that. If I'd have heard it called the Mac Basher, I'd have bought an Atari ST.
Interesting. We've got another one of those. Oh, Commodore would have been featured here if only they'd been awake and shipping out product and support. And we've got another update in those run a real operating system on a console that isn't meant to run that operating system sweepstakes. According to a Hackaday article submitted by Pajako6502, Windows CE is now runnable on the Nintendo 64. That's right, CE, not just for Dreamcast anymore.
Why? Anyway, Rich 2600 links us to a Time Extension article about the possible demise of digital press, with the forum going down for technical, financial, and personal health reasons. The story also details a possible way forward, so perhaps all is not lost.
And there is now a drop-in FPGA-based replacement of the Atari POKEY sound chip going up for pre-order on lotharic.pl. At about $55 US, it appears to be cheaper than other FPGA-based alternatives that I can find for this venerable chip. And unlike the other major option that looks like it's still on sale, it says that it's fine to use in the actual Atari 8-bit computers, not just in the many arcade boards that also used Atari's POKEY chip. So that should be of interest to many. And we don't really get to, if you can even call it a heyday of video game, novel tie-ins until at least the 1990s. But in that area as well, Infocom was a pioneer. And in addition to a few early choose-your-own-adventure Zork-themed titles, Infocom licensed multiple properties in the late 1980s for novels that were written by some prolific genre writers like Robin W. Bailey, Arthur Cover, Craig Shaw Gardner. Now, these books have naturally been out of print for a long, long time, and publisher Bion Price has been defunct for about 2 decades now, but they have been leaked in a gray market ebook format. We'll link to that Reddit post that lets you know about that. And if you've got news items to share with us or just want to upvote, downvote, participate in the comments, all of that is valuable insight. Please head over to reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. So I heard you. I heard the criticism when people first got an inkling that I might join the show. Oh, he'll only ever talk about text adventures. Text adventures are boring. They're for boring computer nerds, not for cool computer nerds like me. My heroes from the computer magazines, they made fun of text adventures, and they played cool games like Power Drift and Buggy Boy. Now, meanwhile, I was not worried at all about finding time on this show to talk about text adventures. I have a whole other hyper-focused show to do that on. No, I was a little concerned that because of the way story generation works on this show, stories submitted on the subreddit and upvoted and so forth, I was a little concerned that week after week I might be compelled to speak about, week after week about things that are in other people's hyper-focused wheelhouses, like 9-foot-long Amstrad computers or Eurovision. How's that going for me, you ask? Well, last week, of course, we had Joe Cook from the UK Amstrad group on. And this week, Manx Nick let us know that, well, look, there's an interesting tech fellow called Look Mum No Computer who is Britain's entrance into the Eurovision Song Contest. That's how that's going for me. Eurovision is, of course, itself a bit of a retro tech concept, having been created in the mid-1950s, I believe 70 years ago now, as a platform to test and refine multinational live television broadcasts. And this musical artist, also known as Sam Battle, has assembled a variety of curious throwback circuits to create his entry Eins, zwei, drei. According to the Sky News article that was sent our way, Battle's synth rig includes dozens of Furbies and 48 Nintendo Game Boys. Chris, please help me with some context here before we get to the substance of this song itself. Also, let me know, am I allowed to say Manx Nick? Is that okay that I didn't just slur a whole group of Mancunians?
I have no idea.
Right.
And as far as the Eurovision Song Contest is concerned, I mean, it's just war by any other means. We're a proudly apolitical show, so kudos to you, Jason, for tackling a competition that is very political.
I have to go where the news is.
It's true. I actually found the entry, which was by the UK, obviously, or by England. Is it just England or the UK?
Britain
anyway,
was how it's being
Britain.
described.
Oh, okay, Britain, which is just the main landmass, so that doesn't include Northern Ireland. Anyway, I actually found it quite catchy. It's by no means on par with All About the Pentiums by Weird Al, but it's got a nice hook to it. It's just ironic that for a UK entry, that hook happens to be in German.
Making it a multinational submission. So, Chris, you said you enjoyed the tune. I will say that I dutifully listened to the whole thing. I watched with the video presentation. It does. I got to say, like, it has a very heavy. If you, and I mean you, the This Week in Retro viewer listener, if you are watching us, then they tried to make this song and video for you. There's a heavy reliance on 1980s computer imagery, particularly but not exclusively like beige CRTs, some of which are people's heads. My personal involvement with Eurovision is real limited. I do remember some years ago when I was first turned on to the popular instrumental arrangement of Love is Blue, and I looked into the song and I found out that with different orchestration and vocals and a French title, it was Luxembourg's 1967 Eurovision entry. And I went, that's nice. Let's just say the presentation of that song in 1967 was a whole lot different than the whole pyro and lighting effects jazz surrounding Eins, zwei, drei. Honestly, looking into Battle's other projects was a lot more rewarding, like the Furby organ itself that's alluded to. Although, without any nostalgic connection to the Furby, just seeing these creatures piled up on this synth nightmare might just be terrifying and upsetting rather than giving you that kind of nostalgic vibe that I think he gets out of it. But hijacking that Furby speech tech to create a playable organ, and this is undeniably a very cool hack. We do regret to inform that Battle's entry scored dead last out of the 25 participating songs in the contest this year, collecting just 1 point. This, I understand, is usually the British entry's fate in the contest, although sometimes they're nul point or 0 points scored, and so this was a bit of a moral victory in that he did come away with a single point.
Un point. It's just a meme at this point that England get nil point. It's just the way the show goes. I don't watch it. I seriously don't. I just have to catch up because it's one of those things. It's like football. You don't want to know the scores, but everybody's talking about it, so you find out what went down. Look, maybe it didn't score so highly because, like I say, I think it was quite catchy. But it's somebody ranting about a thing, being negative rather than talking about what they like to do and being positive. So maybe there's a bit of that. I don't know. But I mean, his rant was, it's about the kind of ethos, I guess, behind New Commodore, about being unplugged. But I would rather me sing a song about what he does like besides, counting to 3 in German. Maybe write a song about an outdoor activity that you like. I don't know. Off the top of my head, maybe horse riding. Yeah, a song about a lovely horse and seeing it run through the fields with its fetlocks blowing and maybe taking it to a horse dentist. Something nice like that. Probably with a nice loud sax solo in the middle.
Are you doing a stealth look at my horse is amazing in here?
It's a Father Ted reference, Jason, and I knew it would be lost on you, which is why I went deadpan. Everybody else would have known exactly what I was talking about.
The lion's share of the audience roaring with laughter now. And
yes.
Got it. Well, we do offer our congratulations to Look Mum No Computer on his single point on behalf of Britain. I mean, that is 1 more point in the Eurovision Song Contest than the likes of any of us, I assure you. And please let us know, Mr. Battle, if you have any jingles to submit to Housekeeping from that Furby organ. We'll put it in.
On now, already, Jason, to our community question of the week, which last week was, which video game would you like to see adapted as a board game? Or which board game should be converted to the screen. So I believe we're out of contest mode. Is that right, Jason?
We are out of contest mode, and Mr. Ballot Box Stuffer himself, Jeff Mendoza, oh, look, he's clocked in at the top with the crowd pleaser, Outrun, the board game. It wouldn't be very good. And then discussion ensues about which board game adaptations might not be very good. But Jeff Mendoza, you and your squad have done it again. You're at the top of the list. Congratulations.
Yes, the discussion is just as funny as the entry itself, which is quite funny. Milane P64 says, I started working on a board game adaptation of Mike Singleton's epic strategy game Midwinter about 10 years ago. And then he goes, it's quite a long submission, so I don't think we can read the whole thing out, but he goes into how he started by creating a detailed map of the island, by using zoom map function within the game, and then stitching all those images together. So it sounds like it's really gone to a great length to actually make it accurate to the original game. So,
yeah,
and he's given us.
He's also participating in that fan remake of Midwinter. So there's a lot happening in the Midwinter community.
Yeah, and he's given us some Google Drive links to his stuff as well. So there we go. That's fantastic.
Very cool. And Rowan Forrest is next down. I'd like to see a board game adaptation of the famous DOS game, Configuring AutoExec.bat for more memory with add-ons IRQ Trouble Ahead and the Mystery of HighMem.sys. That would be a brilliant board game, I believe. Now, you joke, but I mean, how many modern board games are resource management and allocation? It's Germans sitting around. If they give you only these 17 boxes, you must optimize the placements of these boxes.
That's true.
At the end of 4 rounds, somebody is the winner. Like, that's basically shifting memory around. So, Rowan Force, you may be on to more than you know.
Needs to have a 3-sided dice so we can count 1 by 3. Since we've got some time.
German, the inclusion of German in the British entry, this is really bothering you.
No, it's not. It's just funny. And funny enough, that is what's so catchy about it, is this 1 by 3 all the way through. I did learn a tiny bit of German at school because I hated French. And then so I found a way out of French, and thinking I would just go into a hobby class, I got forced to learn German instead. So, yeah, there you go. Richard Shears says Lemmings, especially if they could explode. And with a bonus subscription model to replace the Lemmings that you blew up. That's fantastic. Bit messy, perhaps, but yeah, there you go. Any other submissions that jump out to you, Jason?
Well, I noticed that last week's guest, Joe, jumped in and mentioned if you're into those kind of cute game characters of the early 90s vibe, that there is a Worms board game, which I didn't know about, but trust to Joe to jump in with that. Happy Coding ZX. My first thought was Sinistar. One team aims to collect the pieces of the Sinistar while the other attempts to stop them. Yeah, as a head-to-head or as a collaborative game, that game mechanic actually is pretty compelling. And of course, the game, as he puts it, would come with a little soundboard that says, "I live," and "Beware, coward." So,
did anybody take this the opposite way and take a board game and turn that into a computer game? I don't think they did they?
Take a board game.
Oh, here we go.
Yep.
Ticket to Ride as a video game, Railroad Tycoon as a board game. There you go. So those interchangeable.
Board game version of Manic Miner from Osprey Shower. 3D Monster Maze from Pajaco. Yep, there are a few.
Yeah, cool. Fantastic. What's this week's question of the week?
This week, you can suspend the laws of physics. You can fold any piece of retro kit into any piece of furniture. What tech and furniture would you combine?
Oof. Fantastic.
So you can find that question and our stories on reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. Chris, we did it. We bravely and briskly went through this episode. We were not rushing, despite the fact that Chris has a major life milestone celebration. If you want to share that with the class.
Oh, yeah. No. I was almost going to share it at the top, but we did something better instead. But yeah, no, I'm celebrating, as of today, at time of recording, 30 years of marriage. So quite a milestone.
It is quite a milestone. Yeah. Congratulations to both you and Nicky.
Yes, thank you very much. And to help celebrate over the weekend, we actually, we did lots of activities, but one of them was go to a Time Zone arcade and play some air hockey and some pinball. So there we go. Nice and relevant to the show.
All right.
Cool.
With that, we have been Jason and Chris. We've done This Week in Retro with no adult supervision. We made it.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Dave will be back, by the way. It's not that he's...
And literally, Dave's having car trouble. The best reason to miss a retro racing-themed show. A little bit of car trouble kept Dave away today, so we will have him back next week. And all sorts of excitement coming up in, well, my summer, Chris's winter. You get it. It's fine. Let's get out of here, Chris.
It's because he's got a Jag. Yeah. Bye. I'm waving. Jason's waving.
I also am waving.
And now Dave will be waving because I'm about to go in his Jag.
I'll be waving back.
Bye.
See you guys next week.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 The Gamer, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Stiles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.